Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And we are all enunciating Mo Beta today because that is the thing we're going to be working on.
Yeah.
All right.
We had a close friend chew us out harshly over our comprehensibility.
That is not at all what happened.
Just teasing.
Yeah. Okay, so we promised y'alls that we would have Jay say stuff about why the lithium hypothesis was silly, and then we lost Jace, and fucking Wes was like, you blue-balled your entire audience, you dicks, and we were like, you know what? We got blue balls too. So Jace.
Yeah, I was surprised actually to hear that many people were like, wait, what about lithium? Because I didn't realize that was going to be that interesting. So it's actually not the fact that the lithium hypothesis is silly, it's just that I've seen interesting contradictory things. Mm-hmm. So there was this USGS study, reporting about 45% of public water and 37% of the U.S. domestic wells have concentrations of lithium that could present potential human health risks. Lithium occurs naturally where groundwater interacts with either like stuff with lithium in it or saline water. Mm-hmm. And the most elevated levels are found in samples of untreated groundwater from arid regions and in old groundwater, meaning groundwater that recharged the aquifer before 1953.
Okay.
And so this one study...
that was part of the thing that, like, the deeper we drill, the older the water we get, right?
Yeah, or just there's some areas where it doesn't refresh. They were saying, like, in the Midwest, in the U.S., like, Midwest and South, so...
Oh, wow, okay.
So the study does say, although lithium is useful, at therapeutic doses, it can cause adverse effects, which people who take lithium know it sucks. Mm-hmm. It primarily impairs your thyroids and kidneys. And presently, it's not regulated in the U.S. in its drinking water. Mm-hmm. The USGS, collaborating with the EPA, calculated, I'm going to skip past some of the jargon, but basically that here's the levels it should be at, and then the levels that we are finding is higher. And not only from drinking water, but you can get exposed to lithium from eggs, dairy, and soft drinks and beer. And yeah, it said that the high benchmark was exceeded in 9% of samples from those public supply wells and 6% higher, and the samples from the domestic supply wells, so that was concerning. But then on the other hand...
I also, if I can interject real quick, I think that their benchmark level is set too high as well, that like... One of the arguments in the chemical hunger is that the actual amount that can affect you, at least affect your lithostat, is a fair bit lower than that.
Yeah, I think this wasn't specifically lipostat, just more of the, like they mentioned, the thyroid and whatnot. But So this other study though says naturally occurring lithium in public drinking water might have an anti-suicidal effect. This was from the Brighton and Sussex Medical School and the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at King's College London. Didn't Scott Alexander like a year or two ago post this thing about how suicide is higher in high elevation areas, and that is fucking weird? What's going on? I think Scott actually specifically commented on lithium. That's probably where I heard about it.
Ah.
Or where I heard, so the study author from the King's College study says, it's promising that higher levels of trace lithium in drinking water may exert an anti-suicidal effect and have the potential to improve community mental health. The prevalence of mental health conditions and national suicide rates are increasing in many countries. Worldwide, over 800,000 people die by suicide every year, and suicide's the leading cause of death among persons aged 15 to 24 years, which is really depressing. Mm. Yeah, Eneasz just pulled up some info on this altitude.
But yes, apparently high-altitude suicide rates are significantly higher than both middle altitude and low altitude, which...
You think that's because our moods aren't being regulated with lithium?
I'm not saying that, but I'm kind of gesturing in that direction.
It's a hypothesis.
Yeah.
And...
We're all just too numbed to realize that life isn't worth living.
Oh my god.
And mental health has gotten a lot better since moving to a higher altitude because of sunlight, so there's a lot of, factors, but just finishing this up, the health benefits and curative powers of naturally occurring lithium in water have been known for centuries, such as the Lithia Springs, which is an ancient Native American sacred medicinal spring, which has naturally high lithium, or lithium-enriched water, is renowned for its health-giving properties, and in fact, the popular soft drink 7-Up contained lithium when it was created in 1929.
Oh, shit.
Recent studies have also linked lithium to reduced incidence of Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. The study mentioned a few other things it helped with too, but yeah, so the jury's kind of out on this, but
Wait. So, but wasn't your whole idea that you don't think lithium is what is causing the obesity epidemic?
Well, I wasn't saying that I don't think it's causing it, but I was saying that I don't want to demonize lithium for that reason.
So you're saying it could be, but lithium is still...
It might be a contributor. I also, think that it has a lot more to do with kind of, again, like the Goyene's hungry brain hypothesis about breaking the lipostat and high satiety foods. But I'll link the source to the study, and also I just wanted to say that after hearing about this, I did experiment with taking lithium orotate at 120 milligrams for about 2 months, and I think it was just a bad time to do an N of 1 study on myself because I had that was when like really bad stuff was going on in my life, but I'm going to try to redo that experiment when I'm more stable, and well, I'll see if it has any benefits, I guess. But
is that at all like the lithium that they give you in the prescriptions?
It is not, but
it might still be effective.
That was the one that was recommended if you're going to take like supplement it at just trying to compensate for lower like naturally occurring lithium. And I was on a bunch of Reddit threads and various like forums trying to find data, and it was really frustrating because it was like half the people screaming lithium is amazing and saved my life, and half the people screaming lithium ruined my life and never take it. So
Okay.
it was a little bit of a nerve-wracking experiment, but I basically didn't really notice any difference from baseline for myself. So
okay. Well, I really wish that there was better news, because I thought we were about to hear like, no, actually lithium doesn't fuck up your lipostat at all, and here's the reasons I think that.
Well, I think even if it does, it might still be beneficial. Like, a person would probably rather be obese than suicidal. Although obesity,
that sounds like a trade-off I'd make.
Cause suicidality, so...
So I definitely find the idea of some sort of environmental contaminant contributing to... it would have to be more than just obesity, but that seems like an easy metric, right? Or like at least one easy thing to look at. But just like shit in the water and air is like going to be a very common source of a lot of problems, I think. So I think I find that part compelling. You mentioned last episode and just now that book that you read that I'm blanking on the title of.
The Hungry Brain?
Yes. What is
The Hungry Brain?
The Hungry Brain. What is the you said you like rush past the like their competing hypothesis, but can you succinctly describe like what their main take is?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought we had talked about this before, but
we might have, but my brain is...
We've touched on it, but it was a while ago.
Yeah,
I think.
Anyway, it's basically like a primer on nutrition, and I really liked the book because, well, first of all, I heard about it there was a Slate Star Codex book review that does summarize it pretty well if you don't want to read the whole book. But it was the first like book that I read about nutrition that made any sense to me at all, because there's so much garbage about is sugar bad, are carbs bad, is is fat good, what's up with cholesterol anyway, and so there's a lot to summarize, but like the takeaways about obesity were, well, first of all, things to do with having higher leptin.
Leptin.
Yeah, and they did crazy studies where they would like breed mice that naturally just overproduced leptin and then sowed them to healthy mice. And well, they sort of did this vice versa, where you can have like the circulatory system sort of dump into one mouse or the other, and the healthy mouse's normal leptin would regulate the obese mouse, and it would like thin out, versus both mice would become obese. But then it like kind of goes deeper where, okay, so why do you have increased leptin? And it has something to do with brain, the brain's like satiety center and other things involved in sort of the brain-gut connection going on. So there's like children born who have this satiety center, I think, or maybe it's the hypothalamus, with there's some kind of mutation that makes it so they never experience satiety regardless of how much leptin is in their system. And people who have this disorder like become obese as like 3-year-olds. All they think about is food. All they want to do is eat. They collect cooking utensils and cookbooks, and it's...
Imagine never feeling like you had enough to eat. That'd be fucking horrifying.
Apparently it's worse than that. It feels like you're like starving all the time, or at least just like really uncomfortably hungry.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So just so the Explain Like I'm 5 version, it sounds like the competing hypothesis there is that something is raising leptin, maybe the food that we're eating.
Yeah. So it links or discusses other studies. For example, like people who, well, first of all, rats that were given the cafeteria diet, like human foods that you would find in your basic cafeteria, who all got obese. This was after they were trying to make rats obese, and it was actually really difficult, regardless of giving them like really fatty rat chow or whatever. They did other experiments where they had humans live in basically like kind of a clinical research prison for a bit. I mean, they were taken care of, but the only thing they were allowed to eat was basically like Soylent that was dispensed from a drink thing, and everyone lost weight or like maintained a healthy weight, and they weren't given any kind of like restrictions on what times they could eat or how much, and their body just naturally like, oh, if it's just like bland nutrient slurry, they naturally seem to just know how much they needed.
I'm just picturing one of those like little water bottles you put in a hamster's cage that you like you tongue the little ball to let the liquid out.
I think that it was actually something like that, and every click gave you 7 milliliters or something. It was really dumb.
That's hilarious.
I think the scientists had to be able to measure how much each person was drinking somehow.
Yeah.
But
So that was what
it does kind of sound like a hamster cage situation.
I would measure the quantity that's left in the vessel. I wouldn't have to measure by click distribution, but I'm sure there's a reason they did it that way.
Yeah.
Isn't the new anti-obesity medicine semaglutide? Is it
Semaglutide?
Yeah, isn't that a thing that adjusts your lipostat?
I'm in this lucky class of human that
Right.
I'm going to look like a little boy my entire life. So I've basically maxed out in my size.
Yep.
And I've been
same team.
I
Little boy club.
I can basically fit in the same clothes I wore in high school. So what I'm getting at is I have no idea what the latest diet pills are made of because
Right.
I've never had cause to.
I find it interesting. And then like just a little bit more, because like it's really complicated. That was really the takeaway from this book. But it's not that we don't know anything about it. It's just that it's not. You can't just point it and be like it's carbs.
Right.
And this goes into, sorry Wes, evolutionary psychology. But imagine a hunter-gatherer finds a beehive, like a honeycomb. So normally your brain is supposed to regulate, okay, like, this much calories needed for this much amount of activity. But if you find something that's really rewarding, the hypothalamus freaks out and it actually turns the satiety center off. And
So
it does this
for a
for
while.
fat, sweet, meaty. Yeah, exactly. Like you want to eat that whole honeycomb because that's going to be something rare in the ancestral environment. And variety too. So that's why like at buffets you can eat more. That's why, theoretically, again, if you have a huge meal and you're like, oh man, I'm so full, I can't eat another bite, but someone brings cake and you're like, oh, I could have cake. And it makes perfect sense evolutionarily for why you'd want to make sure that you're getting enough varied stuff, because some things will kill you. If you just eat kale, you're probably not getting all of the nutrients you need. And if, you're trying to survive in scarcity, if you do find a honeycomb, you want to eat that whole honeycomb. Like, you're not going to find that again maybe for months.
2 quick comments.
Okay.
One, just a general annoyance that like you'd think of the things that humans understand would be like what we need to eat to survive healthily. You'd think that'd just be like something that not necessarily would come out of the womb understanding, but it should be like right after walking.
Well,
I know it's not, and like we get enough to live, right? We know not to eat rocks and all that.
Some people do.
Some people, and they don't live very long. I'm assuming if they just eat rocks, but like I get it, but it's just kind of annoying that health is so fucking complicated.
Well, I think, we kind of did come out of the womb knowing how to do that, because for the most part, people don't have massive issues as long as they have enough food, period. But then we introduce lithium into the environment, and that fucks with everything that our bodies have instinctively known by figuring out through evolution over the past several
I
million
don't
years.
think we introduced lithium to the environment. It occurs naturally.
Well, some occurs naturally, but we have skyrocketed how much we are exposed to, is the contention.
Well, this other,
Needed a chemical hunger.
study says that we're actually not getting enough. Like, my frustration at when someone points to one thing, vaccines cause autism, because, like, what else could it possibly be? You're saying, Stephen, like, chemicals in the environment or whatever, but it's like, everything is so complicated and so interdependent that I always really hesitate to try to, like, here's this one thing that could be the cause of this one thing.
Well, I think it's as they say, it's a hypothesis. I think it's a very compelling hypothesis, and in their final chapter, they lay out quite a number of research ideas that we could use to verify if it is the if it is in fact lithium that is contributing to this, you think we don't get enough lithium right now?
That was what the second study, which I'll link, was suggesting. In fact, like saying that a lot of, you could call it like the mental health crises or epidemic or whatever, and rises in crime rates and whatnot could just be lower rates of lithium.
Well, I think...
And they compared other countries that do have this lithium, stocked groundwater where they have much lower rates of suicide, bipolar and other mood disorders, Alzheimer's, violent crimes.
I kind of think like the natural correct amount of lithium is close to zero, and you can get more lithium, and that has effects like, less bipolar, less suicide, but also more lipostat fucking upping.
Lithium, like I said, is also present in a lot of food products. Like, it's not zero. It is something that we've evolved to regulate to some extent. And yeah, we might be messing with the levels, but I think we just don't know enough to be able to recommend, or to be able to, not even that, but to be able to point at it and be like, aha, that's the cause of obesity, because I think it's much more likely to be the satiety. Just like, we made all of our food super stimuli.
Yeah, but...
we have, like, endless amounts of food, basically, compared to the ancestral environment. That's my hypothesis.
Okay.
My strongest hypothesis.
I kind of disagree based on A Chemical Hunger, because they both point out a number of societies where people have basically limitless food options where this didn't happen, and also that the food was pretty darn wonderful even 70 years ago, and like the food nowadays is not that much better.
McDonald's, though, because if it was like meat, fruit, and vegetables, again, that would be sort of like the Soylent slurry. Like if you're eating normal healthy foods, because that's sort of the deal with like.
I kind of hear what you're saying, but I want to challenge anybody to like go 6 months without eating any McDonald's, and then go and eat some McDonald's, and and consider if this is actually good food, because I've done this, and I went to eat some McDonald's, and I was like, I remember this being great when I was a child, but like after eating real food for 6 months and then tasting this is kind of shit. And it's not good. It's kind of shit. I think the reason people
that's highly
would want
subjective.
to eat it, I think the reason people would want to eat it is because they have this chemical urging by lithium to keep shoveling more stuff into their face, because it is not.
It's very very high satiety though, like it's hyper satiety,
and it's $1.50.
And
right, it's
cheap
$1.50.
and it's readily
Right.
available. Yeah,
And take zero work, but
I mean, like the things that said that other sources of lithium were eggs and dairy products, which both have the bioaccumulation by going through plants and then animals, so everything gets super
you eat more eggs
concentrated.
than anyone else I've ever met. So
I eat less nowadays, although not because of this. I've just been getting more variety in my breakfasts.
I'm not putting it down either. It's a solid. I mean, it beats the hell out of my breakfast. I still eat Cheerios or Fruit Loops and shit. So
And then also soft drinks and beer, which are both manufactured in large factories, which
I wondered about whether that was the manufacturing or the water sources they use, or like, because specifically they mentioned carbonated things.
Yeah.
But anyway, I feel like unless you had more to say about it.
Yeah, I don't think that simply having good tasting food is enough, because I think the average person had access to better tasting food in the past, and also the unlimited foodstuffs also doesn't really work for similar reasons, and that something else must be the case of why things have just gotten so out of whack since about the 80s.
The Hungry Brain also talks about modern day hunter-gatherer societies, and even I forget the island that they mention. It's like something like Papua New Guinea. I don't know. There was some place where no one on this island is obese except for the one guy who would travel and eat a Western diet.
Yeah, they mentioned that in Chemical Hunger as well. Yeah,
I think that we can't really come to any conclusions without doing science here, but
right, definitely need more science.
I look forward to the experiments bearing fruit in the next few years. It'll be interesting. For me, the other just kind of thing that flagged my interest as far as environmental contaminant was zoo animals being heavier now than they used to be, and their diets. They measure down to the leaf. I know, because I got to feed Dobby, the baby, the younger giraffe at the zoo.
They named him Dobby?
Yeah.
Okay, like the house elf.
Like the house elf.
Why would they name a giraffe after a house elf?
The funny ears, maybe?
I guess. Yeah. They're like opposite in size scales, is what I'm thinking.
They're gangly and awkward.
It's a cute name. Yeah, they're gangly and awkward.
Okay, all right, yeah.
But yeah, they control their diets.
But we're historically terrible at formulating artificial food for animals. I mean, we killed cats repeatedly until people finally realized they need taurine.
Sure, but, the animals aren't being fed worse food now than they were 50 years ago.
Yeah, I think the animals at the zoo are getting fed like food, not pellets, but I'm not sure. And it could be that. I have no idea. But what was some of the I was just throwing that out there as like that makes sense why it could be, because we're not giving zoo animals McDonald's, right? So
Yeah.
we're giving them like lettuce and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If that's their diet.
I don't know what we're giving them, but
All right, then the last animal study that might give some evidence one way or another quickly would be if koalas today are fatter than the koalas of 50 years ago, because they only eat eucalyptus, and they only ever have. And so like they're not getting human contaminated diets unless the trees that they're eating their eucalyptus from are full of lithium or whatever now, right?
That's a good point. Where are the eucalyptus grown? Do they have to import eucalyptus from?
No idea.
Okay.
But somebody tell me if koalas are fatter than they used to be.
And where their eucalyptus comes from.
Right.
Okay.
But if you have any
eucalyptus
fat koala
grows-
pictures, send those first.
Aren't they all fat?
Fatter.
Fetter.
Okay. All right.
All right, so the feedback that we got from Jan on our Discord was that when we suggested near the end of the episode, it'd be great if we just added lithium to the water supply to keep people sane and add like semaglutide or semaglutide to keep people thin. Jan said, we do not want more lithium. The sodium-calcium pump is how our nerves generate electrical signals. Lithium blocks sodium. This is why most manic depressives go off lithium after approximately 20 years because the nerve damage is too high. So that kind of sucks. I guess we can't even make society better by giving everyone lithium unless we want them all to get serious nerve damage after 20 years.
I don't think we can give everybody the same thing. Like, what we want is personalized medicine, because I also, I guess, even though I disagree with, or I'm skeptical of some of chemical hunger, I have my teeth gritted whenever I think about, well, let's just add this to the drinking water for all people, or let's supplement everyone with this amount, because that just never works.
So, I mean, I was saying that kind of tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
And I drink a stupid amount of drinking water, so that might hurt me.
As long as we're on listener feedback, there's one other listener feedback. Do you want to hit that real quick before we get into the less wrong posts?
Let's do it.
All right. Derek Heiss, maybe, says in a comment on our website, because we still get those and read them, there might be a better way of rephrasing Newcomb's problem.
Oh, no.
Imagine a scenario where the Newcomb box test is performed twice. The first time you take the test, the opaque box is empty and your decision is recorded as the prediction. Your memories of taking this test and your final decision are completely erased. Then, box B is either filled with cash or left empty, and you would get to keep any winnings. Without your short-term memory, you don't know which test you're participating in. You still have to choose while weighing the consequences of that choice as both a prediction and as a decision. This gives you a strong real-world explanation of what makes the predictor so amazingly accurate. Because it's reasonable to suggest that for 1,000 people who took the test, they all made the exact same choices after their brain states were reset. And yet, it still seems possible to deviate. I thought that was a great way of thinking of it.
Isn't this just backing up me and saying you should one box?
Well, yes. Yeah.
Pre-commit or whatever.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, so I still fail to see how this is a hard problem.
This is yet another way of looking at why it might be possible, why you should one box, that kind of thing.
I really like that's how the predictor works. Like, oh yeah, just memory wipe. And, it's not predicting what you'll do with magic. It just saw you do it 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So I really like that.
Yeah.
This does remind me of the discussion about, for example, in Methods of Rationality, where Harry was taking occlumency lessons and then he had to erase the instructor's mind each time, and then every time he had to go through the same, yes, I called Voldemort, and yes, this arbitrage thing, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember some people saying, that's you wouldn't have the same reaction every time, or maybe there was a better example, but sort of whether there's sort of some of that deterministic or question of free will about whether someone would always, with the same initial circumstances, do the same thing. And this doesn't really answer that. It just sort of makes it into that kind of question, because it says it still seems possible to deviate, but I don't see how.
I agree.
I agree, but it gives you the sense that you could change your mind because you don't know which decision you're making, right?
Yeah.
Well, it would make you feel like you had a choice.
Right.
But I don't know.
The Mr. Bester thing was kind of funny, and I'll just summarize that really quick. Brian, when we were doing We Want More, thought it was unrealistic, and he's like, no way. And we were talking about in a Groundhog
That's what
Day
I was
situation.
thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
And because he had been such a wet blanket on Harry the whole time, I pushed back harder than I think I should have and defended, no, it makes perfect sense. And didn't realize, no, of course, Mr. Buster's behavior would change all the time, because Harry talked about how, oh no, you get him Sunday at midnight when you're paying the money I'm paying. And like, his reaction would be different if you woke him up Sunday at midnight than it would be at 8 a.m. on Friday morning, right? Like, so...
I want to say yes, generally, but if you, like, get a bomb dropped on you, like, Voldemort is still alive, like, you might have the exact same reaction to that news every time.
That part's maybe, but yeah, but then Harry would look at his watch, and 6 seconds later he would say, I do wish I remember that trick about the gold, though. And like, you're going to tell me he's going to say that whether or not he just got laid, whether or not he's got blue-balled, whether he's hungry, whether you woke him up from sleep.
Yeah, every time.
Yeah, so...
That's how I could see this being different, possibly with the Newcomb's box, too. Like, if it's sort of someone pushes the remote and resets you, and it's just 1 second later, you probably keep doing the same thing, but like, if they erase your memory and then come back 6 months.
Oh, yeah, no, that would be silly. It would have to be almost identical circumstances almost immediately.
Yeah. All right. That makes me feel better about maybe free will, sort of.
But hopefully not too good, because
Not
that
too
could
good.
turn into an effective death spiral.
It could.
That was a stretch, Stephen.
Yeah, but it was... I've stretched further.
That's true, yes. You are a very stretchy man. This week's Less Wrong to Post, let's get into those. Effective death spirals is the first one. I don't know how we want to do these. Should I just, like, read the first thing? Or
Yeah,
do you guys have
real
notes?
quick. Effective
Yeah.
death spirals are the things where... It's funny, because he gives you the example of, like, online debates as they were in the fun old days of 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So much
Whereas
fun.
now it's, like...
Oh, now it's been taken to such a hyper extreme. I wish the entire world had read these posts and applied them, and instead they like did the exact opposite,
Yeah,
which we might get into after this.
we have spiraled all the way.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of the one-sentence summary of a effective death spiral. It's the super positive, happy thing that... Like, the super cool thing that you're really into, and it turns out it has positive application in literally every part of your life, basically.
I think so.
Which, if that sounds absurd, that's because it is.
Yes.
But it's only when you spell it out that it becomes absurd.
Yes.
It doesn't feel that way from the inside.
Yeah. He says that because we just talked about the halo effect recently, I believe. And yeah, he points out that the halo effect is the thing where positive characteristics enhance perception of every other positive characteristic. But doesn't that sound a lot like how fissioning uranium atoms sends out neutrons that fission other uranium atoms? Where it
Kind of.
Yeah. It kind of just like spirals and builds and has a critical mass thingy, and that could be very bad. And I believe that's pretty much the whole post. That if a positive thing like that makes every other positive thing look good, and then they look better, so they make all the other ones look better, and so forth. That could be a problem.
Is there a way that this isn't just the opposite of a vicious cycle?
No, this is. I mean, some people would call it a virtuous cycle. Maybe it's actually a vicious cycle, depending on your point of view. Because usually virtuous cycles are cycles that build into something good, and I think this still builds into something bad, even if it's based on a good feeling.
Yeah, it just seems like maybe the choice of the word happiness or positivity is a little off, because what I'm thinking of is kind of bubbles people get themselves in when, say, they belong to the Republican Party and they only watch Fox News, and their Facebook friends are all in that same bubble, and they only read Wall Street Journal. Like,
But I think he uses the term happy because it's like this ideology of ours is the best thing ever and is great, and the world should be made better by it.
At least as the cycle of credulity and confirmation, which sounds more accurate, because I mean, you've seen the same thing happen with outrage porn being a thing that creates these kind of death spirals, because it just keeps pushing your buttons and sucking you back in deeper and deeper and shoving you further into an ideology.
Yeah.
I think he's specifically here talking about happy death spirals, but there are other kinds of effective death spirals.
Yeah.
And so, like, he's admonishing here about, like, this isn't outrage, this isn't partisanship.
It could be outrage. The key is that it makes you feel good to believe it. And ideologies often make you feel good to believe
Or like,
them.
Sure,
again, maybe
but-
not good, but like maybe you feel like you're connected to your culture or your group,
Or that
like, you have righteous anger.
I was about to say, moral righteousness is
Yeah.
one of the best feelings there is. And I say this as someone who had a lot of it in the past, and fuck me, still does.
And
Fine.
that is a pretty fearsome thing if, you consider the things that people can justify.
Yep.
It's a different kind of positive feeling, though, than, like, oh man, this new thing I discovered, Bayesian rationality is the solution to all of my problems and more, right?
Yeah.
So I think that this is him setting the groundwork for, like, this isn't a cult, I swear, right?
Well, part of it, yeah. I mean, yes, it does later on tie into that. I think this is part of his, here's things to watch out for if it's a cult. And I don't think he ever says this isn't a cult, I swear, but he says, like, don't do this thing or you'll turn into a cult. And I don't want that, and no, neither does anyone else. So I think this was very good idea of him to do beforehand, and is one of the things that stopped the rationality thing from becoming a cult, because he was like, look, guys, if you feel too happy about rationality and think it's the best thing in the world and everything about it just makes everything else seem cooler, take a second look, because you might be getting into cult territory. And, it's really fucking great when someone starts out their cult by saying, don't be cult-like, that sucks. And then we don't have one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, resist the happy death spiral. Literally what we were just talking about. How can you resist this happy death spiral?
Cut up your great thingy into smaller independent thingies and then treat them as independent thingies.
That's basically it. And it's great. He gives the example of a Marxist would cut up Marx's great thingy into a theory of value of labor, a theory of political relations between classes, a theory of wages, a theory on the ultimate political state of mankind. And then each of these should be assessed independently, and the truth or falsity of one should not halo on the others. If we can do that, we should be safe from the spiral, as each theory is too narrow to start a spiral on its own.
Yeah, this reminds me of the other sequence, or I forget if this was a sequence or just something on Less Wrong, but the idea of keeping your identity small, where that was kind of my solution too, where I was like, my preference was to keep my identity, but like, what do I want to say? Large, but like, varied. Like, I'm not tied into this cluster, or like, this one thing. So you have...
Yeah, it was a Paul Graham post, actually.
Was it?
Yeah, we should do a whole episode on some of his best stuff, because holy shit, he writes some really good things.
Yeah. Anything else about spirals? How you do avoid a happy death spiral. You split it into parts. You treat every additional detail as burdensome. You think about the specifics of the causal chain instead of the good or bad feelings. You don't rehearse the evidence, and you don't add happiness from claims that you can't prove are wrong. And then, so that is how you do avoid the happy death spiral. You do not avoid it by refusing to admire anything too much, conducting a biased search for negative points until you feel unhappy again, or forcibly shoving an idea into a safe box. And I like that he caveated those things.
Yeah.
Because, like, especially, refusing to admire anything too much, there's this sort of unweaving the rainbow where, like, I always was really angry at this idea. Like, if you, analyze something, then it ruins the beauty or whatever. Like, no, it's awesome. It's like, it's even cooler. There's so much more to know about rainbows now that you know what they're made of.
Yeah. He started the post by saying that science actually really is fucking awesome and one of the best things ever. And we're right to admire it because of how much good it has done. Alright, and our last post is Uncritical Supercriticality, which basically starts out with the question of, is atheism a religion? And he reminds us that arguing over the meaning of a word nearly always means that you've lost track of the original question. So what the argument was originally about is why at certain points in human history large groups of people were slaughtered and tortured, ostensibly in the name of an idea. Redefining a word won't change the facts of history one way or the other. So, yeah, basically, is atheism a religion really doesn't matter because people were arguing about what ideas caused other people to slaughter large groups of people, and in the past those were mostly religions, but it doesn't have to be just religions.
Or whatever they were trying to equate religion to meaning. Like, it always seemed to be this sort of gotcha where, you atheists pretend you're so above it all, but you guys are basically a religion too. You've got your beliefs, we've got ours, we're equal.
Right. And then you're arguing over definitions of words again, and then that's stupid, and you should step back.
Insert Stalin, and
Exactly.
then insert Hitler, and, it's... those were all fun times. Remember that?
I
Then
do.
Harris's book, The End of Faith, had this... He put I think the hardest swing on religion I've ever seen, and emphasized some of the absurdity in the Deuteronomy quote that Yudkowsky pulls out here. I forget the full context of it in the post here, but it was like, here's something that, like, this isn't something that you'd find in an atheist circle. And the thing is, you wouldn't find this in a religious circle either. So maybe I'll not really today.
I mean, read the quote first, and then we will both tell you why we disagree.
Outside of certain parts of the world, like, you wouldn't find this, like, for example, during my arguments with people in high school and college, right? No one there was saying we should kill non-believers. But the idea was that if someone, your daughter, your son, actually didn't say your daughter, it was always your son or whatever. It's
your
always
son, your
masculine.
brother, yeah.
Tries to secretly seduce you, saying, let us go and serve other gods. You must not listen to him. You must not show him pity. And then, yada, yada, yada. You must kill him.
Yeah.
Immediately take him outside the city and stone him to death. Right?
Yep.
Take him out behind the shed.
Basically.
Yeah. And the reason that we disagree partly is because this following quote, which is also from the same post, where Eliezer says, "This was the rule which Stalin set for communism and Hitler for Nazism. Do not debate him or set forth your own evidence. Do not perform replicable experiments or examine history, but turn him in at once to the secret police."
That's actually a really good parallel.
Yes.
Yeah, that was the... We look at the abridged version of an already short post in our notes here, and I kind of forgot the context of it. But yeah, it's perfect. And that is the... If we leave definitions of religion aside, this is the crux of what people have a problem with.
Yes, yeah. And that is also, like, I have recently claimed that... Not claimed, because I was not the originator of this idea. I have repeated the claim that has been made by several academics now that wokeism is basically a new secular religion. And while they aren't out killing anybody yet, there is very much, a couple steps below that where, like, do not debate with other people that think differently, do not examine evidence, do not perform experiments, simply cast them out of society and try to make sure that they cannot work or live anywhere.
I wouldn't call it a religion. I would still say it's an ideology, only because they lack the hierarchy and the organization that a religion has.
I don't think all religions necessarily need hierarchy and organization. Maybe they do.
I think they do.
The reason I think of it as a religion is because I think that there are... Boy, we should maybe do a whole podcast episode on this, but in brief, I think that it turns out... humans are very different, which is something I did not know when I was younger. I was really surprised by this, and it's a whole revelation that I'm going to have to write a whole thing about. But humans are really different, and like I am pretty much fine without a religion. I don't have those religion needs and hooks in me.
You don't have a God-shaped hole in your heart?
Sadly, no. But it turns out that like a lot of people honestly are just different people, and they have these religious needs and drives and hooks in their being. And when atheism pointed out that religion is fucking stupid and God is a bullshit sky fairy tale, they were left adrift without those needs being fulfilled, and life sucked for them for like a decade. And then wokeism has come in and hooked into all those needs and is fulfilling them. And I think that is why it is akin to a religion, because it meets those needs that religion used to meet, but without a sky daddy.
I feel like that too neatly fills the explanation.
Yeah,
like,
oh,
look,
it's my own little...
Oh, no, I like that, but it's just like, it's also kind of has like that same kind of like, oh, we'll call ourselves brights instead of atheists. Kind of like,
A+.
We don't need religion because we're better than them, but the plebs, they need it, right?
I really think people are different.
There might be something to that.
Now. Yeah, because I felt the same way. I was like, no, you just get rid of religion, we'll all be better off. And I'm like, oh no, this, wow. People are very, very different.
I agree with both of you, where I don't think that there is a God-shaped hole in people's hearts necessarily, or like a religion drive per se, but you do tend to see we are communal animals, and humans get together, they make traditions, and they have superstitions, and they do rituals, and there does seem to just be something human and comforting about that, but it doesn't have to be based on magic and persecution.
I would, if I was going to compare wokeism to religion, I would point out that it deals in sacred truths rather than in questioning one's assumptions and looking for answers, right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of our sacred truth, and I love it.
Well, yeah, it reminds me of the Carl Sagan quote describing science, and he says, the only sacred truth is that there are no sacred truths. But if you're to hold that up as like, aha, you guys have sacred truths too, it's just not really fair.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying that...
You care about things too.
Right, yeah, it's like...
The reason... Because John McWhorter put this forth in his book, and he points out things like wokeism it's specifically an American phenomenon and an American Protestant phenomenon to fill in the religion gap that was created when New Atheism, basically kicked out religion.
Because all-consuming ideologies.
Well, not only is it an all-consuming ideology, but it is specifically to help these Protestants that don't have religion anymore, because it has the same things as Christianity did. It has an original sin. It has redemption through faith rather than works. It has the confessing that you are an irredeemable sinner and throwing yourself upon the mercy.
It kind of has its holy books in the sense that you need to provide receipts.
Yeah. It really mimics Protestant Christianity in many ways, aside from taking out the God aspect, because that was the part that the atheists were like, you're wrong and stupid, and it was wrong and it was stupid, but a new religion came in that just was like, okay, we'll replace that wrong stupid part and bring back all the other things, and all those other things were still shitty too.
Is the claim that this is a purely American phenomena?
Primarily, yeah.
Definitely have seen this in other.
I think it's absolutely going on everywhere.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It's
In different forms, actually,
Yeah.
though. Like,
it is very different in other countries, and
this could be a really interesting topic to talk more about what it looks like, because I remember reading, I don't want to get into it, but I read this really interesting article about what South Korean culture is like.
I read about how wokeism is trying to spread into France and how that is affecting their culture. Yeah.
I just remember hearing like a couple of years ago that someone running for some government seat in South Africa was taken down by some tweet they had said about something or other that was innocuous 10 years ago, but now wasn't. And that sounds like pure, that sounds like purely this phenomena, but it's...
The OG wokeism.
Yeah, but this was years ago in South Africa. Like, this wasn't... and I guess to say mostly an American phenomena doesn't mean it can't be elsewhere, but it seems...
Maybe an American-led phenomenon.
Maybe. I'm inclined to, like, 90% of bullshit I see online, which is great because I'm barely online anymore. I just assume everybody who is being insane is literally... like just a Russian agent to sow disharmony.
Yeah.
And
that probably makes you sleep better at night. I got really upset recently. I was going to say this when we were talking about why, when Eating Ashbeth went, or like, well, I don't think people are, believe in this stuff anymore. I was on YouTube. It was on something completely unrelated. It was like a psychiatrist talking about working with patients and just... yeah, completely unrelated to anything. Or actually, no, it's even worse. Somebody wrote this, like, comment that was this really sad, oh, my dad had this and we struggled for X many years, like, wrote this really, like, heartfelt thing. And someone replied to it and started screaming about how COVID vaccines are a, like, communist, scam to get us all microchipped, and then something about the second coming. Like, it was...
Sounds like a Russian bot to me.
Like... Maybe, but like I hope so. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna headcanon that's what that was. So I'm less
This was
upset about.
YouTube comments.
Yeah,
I mean, this isn't a real place anyway. Then this is purely just for insane people.
but like what was funny was everybody else in the comments thread was trying to be reasonable and saying, "Can you please explain what you mean by that?" And like this thing is contradictory. And then the person just kept rambling more stuff that made no sense. And the person kept responding each time that you didn't answer my question.
Right.
Please read my original question. So, like, I was glad to see that other people kind of came together to police the comments section. But I felt really bad for the original person who just wrote a nice story about her dad and had this shitstorm follow.
I think YouTube has done something with their algorithm where
they have?
where the comments that are more promoting, reasonableness rather than outrage are the ones that are being shown now.
The comment section's so much better. I can actually sometimes read the comments now.
Yeah, it's weird.
I only ever glance at comments if I'm listening to like work music and it's like a 10-hour track of things. I'm like, what song is this? And somewhere in the comments will tell me. Or if it's like, here's how to replace the spark plugs on your car.
Yeah.
And especially because they took away the you can't see the downvote count. And fuck me if I'm going to follow a tutorial that had a 50% downvote, right? So I need to skim the comments and be like, did this actually work?
Yeah.
But what am I going to, like, watch a YouTube video on some video game thing and, like, read what other people have to say? No, I'm going to just...
I mean, no, generally not. But it's striking how it feels like a social good to get rid of all the outrage porn and hate-mongering that has been poisoning our society. But then I'm like, that's kind of, again, scary that giant... masters are controlling what is said and seen.
Outrage porn fills your God-shaped hole.
Damn it, maybe it does. Well, I don't want more of it, but I also don't want censorship, so I'm kind of torn.
Now, the way I think about that is that the really vocal, terrible people tend to be a small, angry minority, and they're just making spaces worse for everyone. This feels more democratic in the sense of, like, other people who might not even want to read the comments or get involved are now posting, and, like... the rest of the comments in that thread were all like really interesting stories about like people's experience with therapy or with like family members with a certain disorder. That was the only thing that, and
maybe if there was
I've been
some
like
sort of
watching videos and reading the comments in them like for a bit there, and that was the first one I ran into that was just like, whoa.
No, that sounds valuable, and you're looking at stuff where people were sharing things worth seeing.
It was like educational, and the people were providing like really interesting commentary as well.
That's really cool.
Maybe if there was an option to take off filters or something. I don't know.
There are YouTube or there are Chrome extensions that you can do to
Go
change
try
comment.
it.
But not.
Look at it for 2 seconds and then.
Well, no. There are ones where like it can change all the comments to just say puppies or whatever. But there are also ones where you can filter by keyword.
Yeah, but there's none where you can like remove the algorithm that decided which comments get shown.
No, but like I imagine that you could go in there and just say, look, I don't want to see a comment that has the word COVID or vaccine in it.
Yeah,
like, I'm just sick of that shit. So you block that shit out, and then you get to ignore those things.
That's great, and filtering out shit like that is awesome too. But I like the ability to do the filtering myself, and I dislike the ability to remove the filters other people have imposed.
I like the default.
Yeah, the default is great.
I think it's
actually,
good to give
as
you,
long as there was an ability to remove the default, right?
Well, yeah, but I think you can, right? Isn't
don't
that what
think
you were
you
just
can.
saying?
I would like for there to be that ability. I'm not sure if that would be a net positive to society, but
One of
just in
our
principle.
listeners probably knows if you can do that.
Should we finish this up? Because
Yes, where were we?
The next thing we're going to talk about is actually very related, probably. But yeah, let's do this. We were saying that these things will supercharge the halo effect, and we want to avoid them. If you feel that contradicting someone who makes a flawed, nice claim in favor of your position, if you feel that would be giving incomfort to the enemy, then that's a bad sign. Like, I know we all say there's nothing I hate more than a bad argument for a position I like, or for a position I support, and those should be called out because they're bad arguments. If you feel that, like, even saying something critical about a bad argument for a position you support is a dangerous or bad thing to do, that's a sign that you're in a death spiral.
Do you remember Jeff Foxworthy, like 20 years ago, had a sketch that was always like, if whatever, you've got a set of back row truck seats in your lawn, you might be a redneck.
Yeah.
You could do a list of these for like, you might be in a happy death spiral.
Yeah.
If you're afraid to call out any problems with a position that you and your friends agree with, you might be in an effective death spiral.
If you feel like you get some sort of spiritual credit for each nice thing you say about your position, about your great idea,
you might be in an effective death spiral. Or happy death spiral.
If you have the distinct sense that the other people in the room will dislike you for not supporting our troops, if you argue against the latest war,
you might be in an effective death spiral.
And if saying anything about the great idea gets you stoned to death or shot,
you might be stoned to death or shot.
you might just be dead, I think.
Yeah.
Then hence the death spiral.
Yeah.
Then the effective death spiral has gone super critical. It is now a super happy death spiral.
Yes.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, he's saying religion isn't special enough as a class of mistakes to be the key problem. The key problem is super happy, effective death spirals. And they turn much deadlier when criticism becomes a sin, or a gaffe, or a crime.
Yeah. This makes me think of positive psychology, or like sort of toxic positivity, actually. I think that can be really invalidating, and it's hard to be in an environment when you're around a lot of people that sort of are like, turn that frown upside down, you know, like basically where you're being shamed for having negative emotions ever, or worries, you know?
Yeah. Anytime you're shamed for offering a criticism.
And that's not a religion, it's just like another class of mistake.
Yeah, and he points out that, like, one of the reasons it should be okay to argue against arguments, I guess, is that the vast majority of possible beliefs in a non-trivial answer space are false. Likewise, the vast majority of possible supporting arguments for a true belief are also false. So, yeah, a lot of them are just going to be false, even if the belief is true, because the supporting argument is bad. He ends on this note, which I have never forgotten and is one of the most seared into my brain. I love it a lot. Who wants to read it?
I think you get to.
Yeah, you're the one that loves it.
Okay. All right. He ends with, and it is triple ultra forbidden to respond to criticism with violence. There are a very few injunctions in the human art of rationality that have no ifs, ands, buts, or escape clauses. This is one of them. Bad argument gets counter-argument. Does not get bullet. Never, never, ever, never, forever.
Don't do it.
And I'm glad we haven't gotten to that point yet, but I hope we never do.
Yeah, that was my thought too, where I think except for the actually just sort of hilarious protest at that one CFI reunion, like, I can't think of any, like, we as a community, I guess you're still quite small, but we haven't had any, like, terrorist attacks or shooters or, people getting in a knife fight about Newcomb's box, right?
Well, I meant just like in the society we live in here in America, because like up in Canada, they're getting kind of close.
In rationality?
No.
No, I was
the
talking
government.
about, like, our
They pulled
community
back,
here.
which is great, but yeah, no, the government got very close to the point of just making it illegal to say things to counter the government.
Okay, yeah, so...
Anyways,
Yep.
for next time, we are reading boy, this is an interesting name. The Less Wrong Post's fake utility functions and fake utility functions. So I guess we got to
fake.
read about fake ones before we can read about fake ones.
Not to be confused with real utility functions.
It's definitely not. That would be terrible. Alrighty, so today is kind of a grab bag. We're talking about a bunch of things, and one of those things was... Oh, let's talk on Ukraine and Russia real fast before we get totally canceled?
Sure.
Okay. I'm sure everybody by now knows that Ukraine is being invaded by Russia, and Ukraine is putting up a surprisingly strong resistance, although I assume they're eventually going to be overrun just because Russia has so much more, manpower and troop power, unless they get outside assistance. And Russia has said, don't give Ukraine outside assistance or we might nuke you, and increase their nuclear readiness level. In response to that, you guys are familiar with Robin Wiblin from 80,000 Hours?
That rings a bell.
Okay, he's the head of 80,000 Hours, a rationalist, effective altruism organization, and he lives in or near London, I believe, and after, he said, weighing a lot of these risks and his personal costs, he is moving out to the countryside to be further away from a major city center, specifically to avoid the possibility of getting nuked. And what do we think about this, I guess? What are the reactions?
I mean, I don't know much about his financial situation or how much of a life uplifting thing this was. This could have been something he'd been wanting to do for a decade, and it's like, all right, you know what? I've been
Here's
saving
my
for
excuse.
it.
Yeah.
Right. So if rationalists in droves were fleeing the Bay Area in favor of like Wyoming, somewhere where like you couldn't even tell if it was nuked, then like
Wow, harsh.
drive by at Wyoming. Just imagine somebody in Wyoming like angrily taking a horse to Utah to get Wi-Fi to comment back at how rude that was.
Oh my god.
I have family in
We're
Wyoming.
losing all our
I love
Wyoming
it.
Patreons today.
Where was I going with that? Oh, it's one guy who went, yes, smart dude, but
he did say for
bailed.
him the costs are exceptionally low. It basically doesn't affect his life at all, and he was kind of thinking it'd be nice.
So I'm not too worried about like my assessment of nuclear risk going up based on this one guy's kind of like, I felt like doing this anyway decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it is kind of scary. I don't know. I know fuck all about all of this. My hot take is war is bad. I also am curious, like you said, that Ukraine military might be overpowered just by sheer numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Are Ukrainian citizens allowed to own guns? I guess that's my first question.
The Ukrainian government has literally thrown open the armory and is handing out long guns to civilians that are willing to defend the nation. And also they're conscripting all males between the ages of 18 and 60. And I'm surprised they stopped at 18. Usually they go down to 16 in these things to fight the Russians. They can't leave the country now.
There's volunteers as well that they're arming.
There are people
And,
from other countries coming in to volunteer. Yeah.
There's like caravans, or that's probably the wrong word, but like countries that are helping bring people to where they need to be.
I guess I just can't imagine what the end game looks like for this in like a year from now. Say, yes, we've beaten the military, but every time we try and go down the street, someone shoots at us.
Russia, I mean, they'll probably be able to take Ukraine, but they're going to bleed there for 20 years. It's going to be worse than Afghanistan was for us.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's...
I don't know. So I'm not. That's my thing, is I'm not an expert on any of this. I have no idea if Putin's lost his marbles or if this is some smart move.
He
but
lost
like
them a while ago, but
this seems like the stupidest thing. I just can't imagine like engaging in a ground war. Be like, no one will care.
I mean, there's a whole thing about it. In the latest Mind Killer episode, we talk about it a bit, like what Putin's motivations probably are, especially based on the assessment of the intelligence community and what he has said
Wes
publicly.
gave an amazing troop deployment.
Yes, he did.
It might be largely motivated by small dick energy.
Yes.
So I thought I was laughing out loud in my car listening to that. Wes.
Can you summarize it? I haven't listened to that one yet.
I'm afraid I can't.
Or should I just... Okay.
He summarized it.
Explicitly not body shaming, not even about his dick size. It's his small dick energy.
Energy, yes.
And I can't summarize it because it's a work of art. It just has to be consumed in its entirety. So
All right.
yeah,
we'll post a link to it.
I'll prioritize that.
And it is at the very end of the episode, because the troop deployments are last, and Wes's is last. So if that's all you want to hear, skip to like 2-3 minutes before the end.
Can I do a little shout-out thing? A friend wanted me to signal boost Razam. If anyone wants to help the refugees, the Ukrainian refugees in the nearby areas, and has medical training, they should talk to Razam, and I'll post a link. Any prospective volunteers should contact their country's Ukrainian embassy or apply by email, and that's it.
I was thinking, like, to prepare for nuclear exchange, I guess it depends on how bad it gets. Like, it sounds like Wiblin is assuming that maybe a few cities get nuked and it stops at that, because otherwise, like, if it was entire civilizational collapse, I wouldn't want to keep living. But if you think it might just be like 1 or 2 cities get taken out, then some good things that you could do is have some potassium iodine tablets handy, which are cheap, and we will include links, and they will prevent radioactive material from building up in your thyroids should that happen. Best thing to do is, try not to be, if you know nuke is coming, try not to be somewhere where the blast will get you. Like, go into a basement if you can, get behind sturdy walls. Absolutely do not look at the blast. And
I feel like if a nuke is coming for your city, and like it's on its way in 10 minutes, just go outside and let it, don't try and like get crushed by building and dehydrate for 2 days.
If you're gonna be in the city, then yeah. If you're out like in the suburbs, you got a decent chance of surviving.
Yeah, this is all pretty grim. Instead will just look. Let me just throw some probably misplaced optimism at this, and that like I think. What, Stephen? What do you base your prior on?
Mm-hmm.
Hope? I don't see this ending, or like I don't see this escalating to like Russia bombing major cities across the planet, because all that's going to do is make enemies, and somebody will fire back and be indiscriminate about it. Like okay, cool. Well, you blew up London and Paris. We're gonna turn all of Russia into a glass land, and that's thanks for playing. Like
that. I mean, that is the logic behind MAD. Yeah, but I honestly think Putin might fire the nukes if he had the ability to, if it goes badly enough for him. Just because I think he's that kind of person. The what's the point of a world existing if there's no Russia in it type of person.
Or but if there's no Russia ruled by me.
You're right. But whether they would
just assassinates him first.
Whether they would actually launch, like, I don't know. Because he's not the one who literally inputs the coordinates and presses the launch button. He gives the order. So there's points of failure in between. And I kind of hope we'd have another Petrov or something like that. Or even just, his second in the whoever the next down the line is like, nope, not going to happen.
Maybe there's some cool secret nuclear deterrent technology that, like, the second they leave the ground, they're just immediately shot, from space. And moon lasers.
I do think it's a extremely small risk. At least right now. Who knows if things keep escalating? But I don't think it's a huge worry. My main advice would be to have some water in your basement, have some potassium iodine tablets, and have at least 2 weeks of calories in a non-perishable form.
Maybe some gas masks.
Maybe some gas masks. Yeah, but
the ones with the filters. I mean, like the straw filters as well as the obvious air filters.
Yeah, but like some canned food, some water, and I think that's just general good life advice. Also, anybody who listened to our episode a couple years ago with Gray about guns, I really hope that you own at least one gun by now. But,
Astral Codex and Zvi both did some Ukraine warcasting where they look at Metaculus. So if you want to see what the prediction markets think is going to happen, for example, like, will Kiev fall to Russia by April 1st? They gave that a 69% chance.
Nice. Sorry. Inappropriate.
I didn't even register that because I was looking at the chart and trying to like. You said nice, and I was like, yeah, like that's lower chances than
I'm trying to introduce some levity because that's the most bummed I've been during recording in a while. So
no.
It's fine. Nuclear war is serious shit, and it should be a bummer. But I'm gonna just go ahead and stick my head in the sand until a nuke goes off. And if one does, and I miss the news, shoot me a text.
Well. Anyway, I think that's the most predicted relevant question on Metaculus, and it's kind of hopeful that the first day of the war, the market predicted as high as 90%. Then when people realized the strength of the Ukrainian resistance, it fell to 80. Then Saturday, 78. Then 72. And then it went down to 69 after some combination of a really good speech and a report that some Russian paratroopers had been repelled, and then it's been kind of holding at 69 since then. So
it actually is nice.
Yeah,
It's gone way down.
Not, 39 or, but like, it's
trending downwards.
It doesn't sound like it's definitely going to happen, or at least soon.
Real quick, both of y'all, and I'll give my answer too, I guess. If there was complete nuclear exchange and total civilizational collapse, so that afterwards we're living in a Mad Max kind of world, would you want to survive the initial exchange?
Yes.
Okay.
I can always opt out later.
That's true.
Yeah.
I want to survive as long as possible.
All right.
As long as my quality of life isn't... obviously, my answer is always going to be yes, because I want to continue living, and I think that even kind of a miserable existence is still better than not existing. Unless it gets too miserable to the point where it's not like I can't really do the things that are cool, like explore and, read or talk to other humans. So
my answer is no.
Really?
Well, due to the back injury from a couple years ago, I'm now on anti-inflammatories for the rest of my life, and with a civilizational collapse, I couldn't get those anymore, and I assumed the pain would be enough to be severely quality of life degrading. I also wouldn't be able to get antidepressants, and I'm not sure that's as big a deal anymore, because I'm in a better mental position than I was when I went on them, but it might be contributing. But
I think
more
you'd
than
still
anything
be able to
else,
get those things.
Not if there's complete civilizational collapse. That's what civilizational collapse
Yeah, but
is.
there's still going to be black markets and bartering, and there's tons of stock of this shit. You
But
could probably get it from
no one would be
better-
making more diclofenac. That's fine.
Right,
But
that's
like,
the thing.
The thing is,
There's enough stock to last a few months, maybe, and then the
They
rest
know
of my
how to
life
make
I'm in
shit.
pain.
I mean,
That's the point of civilization collapse. You need a society of at least several hundreds of millions of people to do the stuff we do nowadays.
the thing is, I think you'll notice, especially with if your concern is your back pain getting out of control because you're not taking enough non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. I think you would notice today if you started weaning off of them that you're like, oh, turns out I don't need to take 2 a day. I can get by on 1 just fine. Oh, but look at that, I can get by on 1 every couple days.
I actually can get by with 1, but it's more uncomfortable.
I think that. And this is a longer conversation about just chronic pain management, and your situation is probably, everyone's situation is unique, but
But it's not. Oh, go ahead.
I mean, it's just the benefit you get from a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory is pretty marginal, right? And so it might be that you are on the margin that where that little 1% difference actually is, the difference between wanting to live and not. But I suspect you would be like, oh, okay, my mind's occupied with other things, and sure, my back aches a little bit, but I that's just my guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. That is my starting position. But more importantly than that, everything that gives me meaning and that I feel I can contribute to the world with right now depends on this level of technological advancement and this complex of a society. And if that was taken away, there's really not much point to my living as far as I can see it.
You don't think your loved ones would miss you, or that you'd want to gather together with them and try to protect them? That's again.
It's just
what
it's
I'm
so
thinking
hard
about.
to see a future where that matters, because
Really? I mean,
we're all gonna die. There's no way we're going to be able to freeze our heads or reach aging escape velocity because society's been set back several thousand years. At that point, what's the point? It feels to me. And on top of there's no point anymore, I also now have a lot more pain and possibly mental issues, and it's just fuck it. I don't. Why hang on for another 20, 30 years in a hard scrabble, miserable existence?
You could make your life's goal some sort of John Wick style revenge mission
Against who?
whoever.
Putin?
Well, yeah, basically, or anyone who helped was in the chain of command there who was still alive that launched the nukes.
I think if I'm,
you'd be at the back of a very long line of people trying to kill these people.
well, not only that, I'm gonna have a really hard time getting to Russia using only my feet and whatever I can hack together out of wood and ropes.
Somebody will have planes. There are planes. Still.
yeah, we might get that ice bridge back.
Yeah. You can walk.
Anyway, this is really, really. This is such an unlikely scenario.
Yeah, I was just curious what you guys were thinking.
World War III, will it happen before 2050? Metaculus says 20% chance.
Wow, that's more than I expected.
I would need a good definition of what a world war is.
Oh,
But
that's
the
a good
thing is,
point.
over the past 2 years, the question's been bounced from about 7 to 19.
Okay.
So its highest value ever is 20, but it,
Like, is it a world war if, whatever, if the
it
United
defines-
Kingdom gets involved in this conflict?
the World War as any war whose combatants have 30% of the world GDP or 50% of the world population, and in which 10 million people die.
Okay.
So if California goes to war, then it's a world war, basically. If Silicon Valley goes to war, we're halfway to World War III.
At least that makes me feel a little better because you could have a conventional World War III that doesn't end in nuclear exchange,
Yeah, but we could-
in theory.
We could take those nerds.
Not if they're using their robots.
I was actually just imagining Jeff Bezos and his robot being like, "Oh yeah."
I was going to make a joke about, like, any societal collapse that gets to the point where, like, people can't hear this podcast means, like, life isn't worth living anymore.
That's basically my position.
Not because, like, this podcast is what makes life worth living, but if things
Okay,
get bad
you've
enough,
lost me.
if things get bad enough to where you can't listen to this,
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, the internet's gone.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, so
Mad Max
what you
style.
should do is just go to Best Buy today or Amazon or whatever, buy a petabyte hard drive, and just download a ton of shit that you haven't seen yet, and it'll last you some months. You
Yeah.
know, and you'll need a generator.
Yeah.
And then you can just hunker down and, like, oh, I've never seen Breaking Bad yet, like, or whatever, right? So
Yeah. At last, I have time to read everything.
Yeah, right. Maybe it'll be pretty good.
Cool. All right, so I think we got enough time to cover this one last thing. We wanted to desperately try to get canceled, Stephen?
Someone did.
yeah, I put that on the little cliff notes. So I've got just a stupid question because I listen to a podcast called Blockchain Reported once in a while.
It's a good podcast. I like it.
It's good.
It's very culture war-y.
That's the thing. It's entirely culture
Yeah.
war-y.
It's fun in doses.
Exactly. And so that's why I'm definitely not a paid subscriber, not because I necessarily dislike their stuff, but like the 4 hours a week or 4 hours a month of it that I get already is plenty. I do not need twice that.
Yeah.
So anyway, and I even went to Wikipedia and looked, and I couldn't figure out like what made this so objectionable. And this is the perfect fodder for like, this is like, okay, Steven C-lining us. They keep talking about critical race theory.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to Wikipedia and I'm like, okay, teach, the historical context of nothing objectionable there.
Mm-hmm.
Why is everyone losing their shit?
Oh,
Because it doesn't mean what the definition says.
The critical race theory has a technical definition, which is a whole college course thinking of ways of looking at society. Critical race theory is now the term that is used for wokeism. Because people didn't want to say wokeism, it sounds too, I don't know, unprofessional or silly or whatever, so critical race theory is the stand-in for that.
Oh, well, that's a short answer to that mystery then.
Oh, that was all of it?
I was just curious what the contention was here. But if it's because they're subbing it in for another concept that they don't want to defend, they're like, no one's going to defend wokeism, right? Well, let me rephrase that. Some people will be reluctant to defend wokeism as a flag, but if they can put the flag, if they can label it critical race theory or something, or progressivism or whatever, they'll die on that hill, right?
See, I think it was the anti-wokist faction that started calling it critical race theory.
I have a specific image that I just found from the Texas Public Policy Foundation.
Uh-oh.
And it's, I think this was a tweet actually, but are you wondering if critical race theory is being taught in your child's school? Stay on the lookout for some of CRT's less buzzworthy names and language. #ban CRT. And then there's a image of a list of how to identify critical race theory in the classroom.
Read
and
some
so
of these.
like implicit/unconscious/internalized bias, anti-racism, microaggressions, white privilege, CQ, like IQ, but for cultural intelligence,
Oh, that's a new one to me.
colonialism,
You know what's funny about
neocolonialism.
CQ instead of for cultural intelligence is that they got one of the letters wrong out of the 2 letters they shorthanded it for.
Yeah, but maybe they just spelled it wrong, because it does actually say
Didn't even
CQ.
notice that.
I mean, cultural quotient. Okay, sure. Cultural intelligence quotient.
Yeah, it actually is cultural quotient. They just screwed up this.
That's where you quantify how good cultures are.
Okay, just the word normative,
Normative.
apparently.
Okay.
Or identity, or the words ally or allyship,
So
social
talking,
constructs,
No talking about World War II.
Black Lives Matter, reparation. Yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah.
This is funny.
Diversity.
this reminds me, like you said, is your kid being taught this? Here's a list of things to find out. All I can think of is that South Park episode where they're talking about cheesing, where that's like getting high on cat piss.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like fake shit to put on the news to freak out parents to make them stick around to the commercials.
I mean, do you remember, are your kids playing satanic games?
I remember references to that. I wasn't playing games in the 80s.
It's before my time, but
Right, yeah. Though
have friends who
I
remember.
have outed myself as an old again. It's interesting because that is, it was, as far as I can tell, originally a conservative coinage that they don't want to say wokeism because that makes them sound unserious, so they called it critical race theory. And I think that was, kind of a dumb mistake. But all the wokeists just didn't have a term at all because when you're winning, you don't need a term, right?
I think they just called it social justice.
Yeah, maybe they called it social justice.
Or
Social justice was probably the most common term at the time.
It's weird. We were talking about like wokeism as a happy death spiral earlier.
Mhm.
Like and I was cognizant for this sort of conversation back in 2001 when people were responding to like the 9/11 terrorist attacks, with everything from we need to go to war, or let's just nuke the entire Middle East and turn it all into a barren wasteland.
Yeah.
No one, at least in those little circles I was in as a kid, stepped in and be like, that's a really stupid fucking overreaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
The idea that you can't jump in and be like, well, no, actually, hold on. Now that's a step too far.
Mhm.
We have hit that point with some of these topics, right?
Oh yes, quite a bit.
And I don't really know what to make of that other than like things level out eventually.
I get
Right?
this. Is it
do
just
they, or do they just turn into like different kinds of outrage?
is it just me, or has the world been going steadily more insane over the past few years?
No,
I think it might be going more in. Well, that's the thing.
I think we're way saner than we used to be.
Yeah.
I mean, like when you look at those sort of global, levels of poverty, education, literacy, how many people are dying of diseases, etc.
None of those have anything to do with sanity, though. Like, I agree, all of those are much
Well,
better.
I think they do. I mean, being able to develop infrastructure and technology and medicine, has to do with sanity. You can't do that if you're...
Well, I mean, the U.S. is kind of famous right now, and the Western world in general, pretty famous for not being able to make infrastructure anymore due to primarily cost disease. But
we're still like the wealthiest that we've ever been, and
yeah.
I don't know. I think that I think we just have more media and more exposure to all the crazy. It's kind of like what I was saying about the YouTube comments being ruined, or any space being ruined by a small vocal minority.
And I think but that's what I'm saying. That's what's been happening, and it's making everybody more crazy, right?
I think we're just giving more platforms. It's like the outrage porn sells, so more crazies are getting more platforms, and it looks worse than it is.
And I think much of this, like I said, is deliberate enemy action to divide the countries that they're trying to sow discord among, right?
I don't disagree, but if it's working, then the country is actually getting more crazy, right?
Yeah, so I think depending on like the kind of sanity that, or depending on what your metric is, but yeah, if your metric is like how people on Twitter are reacting to things, then yes, things have never been crazier.
Well,
right?
no, Twitter is the far leader in this, but it seems to be seeping more and more into the rest of the world. I used to be like, Twitter, whatever, Twitter doesn't matter, but Twitter feels like it's the breeding ground that starts things, and then it gets more and more into the real world and starts affecting actual institutions that matter and people in positions of power.
I think a lot of this is positive, though. I mean, it gets worse before it gets better, but I think that this is just a symptom of us having like a global platform and all these people being exposed to different ideas and people. And because Twitter, you could say, there's terrible discourse. There's also amazing discourse. Like,
yeah, I think that a lot of the stuff that people are like, reacting against, and that might be going too far in some areas, are legitimate grievances that need to be addressed. And just like, if there's anything I know about history, which is very little, so I could be wrong, but things don't just level out; they swing hard in the other way first, right? So if it's got to the point where like I'm trying to think of something insane. Actually, this is a good example because it was a Russian bot, basically. There was a small internet media outlet. I'd have to find the whole story. Remember, like a few years ago, where like some people might have in their minds that like Aziz Ansari is some creepy, rapist dude.
Yeah.
What it was he had a date that
there was an awkward date,
and it was awkward enough to where, per the woman who was so the woman was reached out to by a small internet magazine owned by a Russian company that does these things. Like, this was a deliberate thing to be like, aha, let's make something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And not only will that piss people off, but when they realize that we made something out of nothing, that'll also piss people off, and they'll have a lot to fight about.
Yeah.
This the kind of little moves that just are really easy to get people to fight over.
Yeah.
But it was something made from nothing, and it was obviously made from nothing. But anyone who pointed that out was then challenged online by saying, "How dare you dismiss this, whatever?" And
They were criticizing a bad argument and therefore got crucified for it.
but I don't know
Sign
if
of
they
an effective death spiral.
yeah, and some of them were probably crucified by further misinformation agents, and some of them were crucified by people who drank the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I bring that up because affirmative consent and the idea of safe and comfortable dialogue before those sorts of activities, that stuff is radically important, and it was not emphasized enough 30 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're swinging back. We're like at the the far end of pushing back against that, but I think it's leveling out to a point where that'll be chill and people can be relaxed and comfortable.
I really hope so.
I think so.
Maybe
I'm optimistic.
It's because I have read a lot of Ada Palmer, and she's a historian. She wrote the To Like the Lightning and that entire Terra Ignota series.
You did an interview with her.
I did.
Once upon a time.
Yeah. Oh, I should link it. But she due to the era of history that she researches, is really knowledgeable about the religious wars in Europe, and like this was not the only reason. There were many reasons behind it, but one of the problems was the printing press and the dissemination of ideas, and eventually Europe found a way to like assimilate this new technology and not have wars against each other, but it took about a century, and hopefully we move much faster in all regards here. But if we have to have like a brief religious war in America before we can figure out how to assimilate Twitter into human life, that's gonna suck.
I remember the great Twitter wars of 2055.
The ones with actual guns and bombs.
I think this is probably the throes of the Twitter wars, and this is as bad as it's gonna get.
I really hope.
Because the other thing I thought of was just history of America is kind of like we had like First Nations people, and then they got colonized, and then other people came over and they all fight with each other and they colonized everything, and then they had slaves, and then that was the thing. And now considering that our big problem right now is people getting angry at each other on Twitter,
right, at least it's not genocide.
I feel like that we're doing a little better.
Yeah.
And that was another thing where the U.S. was this place where they used to call it the melting pot of I forget if it was cultures or whatever, but but yeah, that causes strife. You cram a whole bunch of people together from different races and backgrounds and cultures, and it's gonna take a while for people to figure each other out and how to get along. But it seems to be a thing we're usually good at doing eventually as a species.
All right, well, did we cover all your CRT questions?
It was just the one, basically, of what's the problem here? And I think I get it. Okay, people are waving around the wrong word to be confusing on purpose.
Can I read some funny signs?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I just Googled critical race theory to find that, what was it, little infographic I was explaining, but if you just Google critical race theory and images it, there's lots of protests. So the signs I'm seeing are, say no to 1, CRT, 2, hate. One is CRT is racist.
I agree that wokeism is both a hate movement and racist. The fact that they use CRT is terrible. No one's actually teaching the theory in schools, but when the fact that they're using it as a stand-in for wokeism causes a lot of confusion. They just said
proven point.
Wokeism...
I was confused.
Yeah. If they could say something like wokeism is an ideology of hate and is racist, then yeah, that'd be much less confusing.
I don't know, we got judge character, not skin color. No CRT, no CRT. And
right.
then,
I agree with that. Those are great things.
We are one race. Teach facts, not feelings.
Well.
So, okay, all of these pictures are just all white people.
Okay.
They're all one race. They're not wrong.
I feel yeah, this really strikes me as the sort of I don't see color, there's some amount of me feeling uncomfortable at the amount of discomfort white people have about people being racism exists. We should talk about it.
I don't think that's what people have a problem with. They have a problem with the racism in CRT.
Or being told that you're a racist just because of who you are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's
It doesn't strike me as what's being taught, though.
I don't think that's what's being taught either, but that's one of the,
That's what wokeism is.
Right.
And, yeah, people want to keep that out of schools.
Worst case scenario would be either like reverse racism, but then the other side of that would be let's not talk about race ever and pretend that nothing ever happened and nobody gets discriminated against.
I hate the term reverse racism. It's just racism.
There's somebody I talk with once in a while where that comes up, and I never understood. Well, I kind of do, because I can understand the point, even if I disagree with it, why someone might say, no, it's not racist if it's towards this group of people. And while I disagree with that, I just say, okay, fine, we'll stop being bigoted. And it's like, okay, yeah, they're fine with that. Like, racism is the magic word there, right?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like the word bigot as a catch-all, honestly, because, then you end up, if you're trying to describe the problematics, you have to be like, racist, sexist, transphobes, ableists, other things that end in ist, and it's just like...
And bigoted is a word that hasn't been corrupted yet, so yeah, that's a good, much better word to use.
Anyway, what else do we have?
I think it would be really good if we could start being much more on topic, or at the very least take timestamps anytime we get off topic and put that into Patreon stuff only, because
for people who like the tangents, they can get them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know this has become particularly bad with our Less Wrong posts, where we could actually just finish the Less Wrong posts in 5-10 minutes like we did today, except for the tangent at the end, and we get off on the wildest things, and there's I'm sure people out there that love that, but also other people who are like, why the fuck am I listening to this crazy-ass bullshit about oat milk when you guys were supposed to be talking about defective death spirals?
Yeah, I've heard both. I think I'm in favor of trying to tighten it up. I have heard other people say that they, it sort of feels like they're hanging out with their rationalist friends, and I remember having that feeling when I was just a listener.
Oh.
And...
Yeah, I think, there's probably a sweet spot. Zero digression sounds like a bummer.
Yeah.
But, it does not need to be 40 minutes per episode. I realize it's gotten a bit off the rails.
And usually the problem is, it's one level of just quick digression that's related, and that's okay, but then we digress off that, and then we digress off that, and eventually we're at oat milk.
Wait, what were we talking about?
Yeah, because the digression's interesting, and then, that gave me this idea. Yeah, no, it gets there organically, right? We don't just start talking about Horizon Zero Dawn 2.
Right.
But if you paid to hear this episode, you'll hear a 5-minute talk about that. Yeah, when you pitched the idea, I immediately thought of another podcast I listened to called, I don't listen to this one, actually, called The Mind Killer, where somehow you stay on point.
I think sticking to one topic per episode is good. Also, we could, occasionally, maybe every couple months, have, a rat chat where we just generally throw stuff together and have this sort of conversation like we did today. But, yeah.
I'm into it.
But I think it would be good if those were, less common.
And then less wrong posts toward the end, I'm guessing just because that way we know how much time to give them.
Yes.
Because in theory they take 5 minutes, but if we want them to take 20, they can.
I also think because if someone wants to link to one of our episodes, hey, check out this interesting thing about lithium in the groundwater that they're talking about, they don't have to skip to the 20-minute mark to get to it. They can, just start listening to that and then less wrong post at the end if you want that.
Well, segue into thinking this episode's... our favorite supporter for this episode, which we're doing order of when we received them. I don't know if we ever mentioned that.
Oh.
We read these in the order that people signed up to be patrons for. So if you're wondering why you're this week's favorite, Matthew Fullhart, it's because you were next in order.
And apparently Matthew Fullhart first signed up as a patron April 21st, 2021.
That's right.
Cool. Thank you so much. You have inspired us to tighten up our shit and present all y'alls with things that are easier to find. I don't know. Help me out here. I'm drowning.
No, I hope that the bummer conversation didn't bum you out too much, but thanks again for your support. It means a lot. It still blows my mind that anyone listens to this enough that they're like, I want to throw money at this. So it makes me happy.
And we were just talking about possibly upgrading microphones, so we would be able to use Patreon money to give you guys a better experience and ourselves a better experience, potentially.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks, everybody. We really do appreciate it. All our patrons, and Matthew in particular, you guys are great, and we will see all of y'all in 2 weeks, yeah?
Sounds like a plan.
All right.
Bye, everybody.